The biggest scientific problem for atheists lies in the nature of the universe itself.
Does it now? Please, go on.
The Big Bang is the theory that holds that the universe began with the explosion outward of a high-density pinpoint of matter.
Is it? Are you sure?
Which sounds an awful lot like the creation story at the beginning of the Bible.
Except, no, it doesn't.
How does an entire universe full of energy simply appear out of nothing?
It didn't appear out of nothing. For crying out loud. Right, let's hear out the rest of what Ben Shapiro has to say about the Big Bang and the fine-tuning argument uninterrupted, and then I'll debunk it.
The original skepticism of the Big Bang theory was driven in large measure by objections to that similarity. The very specific conditions under which our universe was created that allowed for the development of intelligent human life are often used by believers as proof of God's hand. The so-called fine-tuning of the universe for life is extraordinary. If, for example, the strength of the Big Bang had differed by 1 part in 10 to the 60th power, the universe just would not exist the way that it does right now.
If the deistic God thought all that through and set up the laws of physics, then he would have to be damn clever.
Atheists claim that just because you won the lottery doesn't mean that you won because somebody intended for you to win the lottery. Somebody had to win. But that doesn't answer the question. If you kept winning the lottery over and over and over and over again, billions of times, at some point, you might suppose that somebody was cheating.
Last week, we dealt with Ben's most prominently defended argument for God's existence in his documentary titled The Atheist Delusion, that being the argument from change. And in this final take of his documentary, I'll be dealing with his second most prominent argument for God's existence, the supposed fine-tuning of the universe. I know, I originally said that I was only going to make 3 responses to Ben's documentary, but some trilogies have their finale split into 2, and so the finale still only counts as 1.
That still only counts as 1!
And let's face it, my Trinity still makes a billion times more sense than the Holy Trinity of Christianity. On this, even Ben would agree.
Debunked.
Before sinking our teeth in, however, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Blinkist, my new favourite workout buddy. Talking of working out, Blinkist is to books what supplements are to meals. Whereas supplements provide key nutrients, Blinkist provides key ideas from non-fiction bestsellers in minutes. And with them having over 5,500 titles covering 27 different categories, I've got company for marathons more. 2 of my goals this year are to 1. Significantly improve my cardiovascular fitness, and 2. Digest more books, and Blinkist has proven extremely useful on both fronts. It ensures that time flies by, and along with it calories, and it helps me to decide which books to eventually buy. As Socrates warned, it is a shame for us to grow old without seeing the beauty and strength of which our body is capable. And if you type in Socrates to Blinkist, you get a wide range of excellent content. From blinks on free speech to Plato's The Republic to the story of philosophy from Will Durant. By clicking my link below, you can get 25% of Blinkist Premium, which features their Blinkist Connect, allowing you to enjoy 2 memberships for the price of 1. Yes, that's 2 memberships for the price of 1. I, for example, have been giving my editor access to all that Blinkist has to offer, and he's been recommending psychology content ever since. What's more, you get 7 days free, during which you can cancel if you're not getting use out of it, so there's really nothing to lose. If you'd like a buddy on your journey to self-actualization, then please be sure to check out the link below. Alright, let's sink our teeth in and address each of Ben's claims at a time.
The biggest scientific problem for atheists lies in the nature of the universe itself. The Big Bang is the theory that holds that the universe began with the explosion outward of a high-density pinpoint of matter.
If you've been watching my content for a while, or indeed just about any content in the atheist niche, you'll know that the Big Bang Theory does not state that the universe began with an explosion, nor that it had matter in the explosion. Rather, the universe expanded, not exploded, and that's not a trivial difference. It wasn't an explosion within space, but rather an expansion off space. And when our universe was in a dense state, it didn't have matter at all. Matter didn't turn up for another 370,000 years after the initial expansion. To put that into perspective, that's longer than we Homo sapiens have existed. So in his introduction to the fine-tuning argument, Ben has made 2 claims about the Big Bang, and has got both of them wrong. For a man that boasts that he's in possession of the facts, for a man who claims to be an expert,
Become an expert.
that's not a great start, is it? I mean, really, Digest this, and bite down especially hard if you happen to find Ben persuasive in other areas, because these non-trivial mistakes that Ben has stated extremely confidently could have been prevented by him simply checking his script once. A simple, single Google search. Hence, the extent of research he's put into his documentary that aggressively demonises atheists and thus encourages bigotry towards us, which I tackled at length in my first instalment, is predicated on the most basic of errors. Seriously, let that sink in. But Ben did state these errors confidently. I've got to give him that, so I guess we'll move on. What I definitely won't give him, however, is what he claimed next.
Which sounds an awful lot like the creation story at the beginning of the Bible.
Oh, does it now? The Bible sounds an awful lot like the creation story at the beginning of the Bible. Really? Well, within his documentary, Ben presents the creationist/intelligent design proponent Stephen Meyer as an expert on biology.
Stephen Meyer, an intelligent design advocate.
And the reason I bring this up is that since Ben is in the business of presenting creationists as experts in fields that they don't have expertise in, let's play his game. Here's a few reasons that a prominent creationist outlet, Answers in Genesis, very much disagree with Ben. As a side note, I am so in the wrong career. Look at that! 17 million raised in, quote, charity. And then there's the Daily Wire with over 1 million paying subscribers. Screw it. I'm going to go Christ for cash. Bugger it. I'm going to convert. I'm going to write a book about how atheism just... I don't know, I'm going to go make money, guys. I'm done. Anyhow. First, and unlike Ben, Answers in Genesis note that matter only turned up, according to the Big Bang, after the universe expanded. But like Ben, they also claim that the Big Bang is a theory of how the universe came into existence.
No, God!
It's not, but we'll get to that in a bit. Anyhow, as they write, the Bible teaches that God created the universe in 6 days, per Genesis 1 and Exodus 20:11. They continue, it is clear from the context in Genesis that these were days in the ordinary sense, that is 24-hour days, since they are bounded by evening and morning and occur in an ordered list. Second day, third day, etc. Conversely, the Big Bang teaches the universe has evolved over billions of years. So there's the first major difference. The Bible has an eloquence of no wasted time for the bread to bake, so to speak, whereas the Big Bang has 10 billion years until our solar system coalesces, and a further 4 billion years until we, God's supposed chosen, turn up.
Which sounds an awful lot like the creation story at the beginning of the Bible.
Here's another 2 ways in which the creation story of the Bible doesn't at all sound like the Big Bang Theory. The Bible says that the earth was created before the stars and the trees were created before the sun. However, the Big Bang teaches the exact opposite. The Bible tells us that the earth was created as a paradise. The secular model teaches it was created as a molten blob. Putting aside the loaded language of Answers in Genesis, these 2 divergencies are pretty damn significant, are they not? Either the Bible or the Big Bang has got it backwards. Not only do they not sound the same, but they actively contradict one another. When even Answers in Genesis, a laughingstock pseudoscientific organisation, debunks Ben, you'd hope that maybe, just maybe, Ben will one day self-reflect just enough to drop his confidence by a margin.
Which sounds an awful lot like the creation story at the beginning of the Bible.
Except it doesn't, does it, Ben? Oh, and while we're on it, here's a perfectly relevant difference pertaining to how matter came about. Get this, the Bible claims that the earth and the universe were made all together at once. The Big Bang, on the other hand, claims that the crucibles within us are traceable to stars. As Lawrence Krauss put it.
So forget Jesus, the stars died so that you could be here today, okay? And anyway.
But to put one more nail in Ben's crucifix, here's another salient point made by the likes that Ben teams up with when it suits him. Many people don't realise that the Big Bang is a story not only about the past, but also the future. The most popular version of the Big Bang teaches that the universe will expand forever and eventually run out of usable energy. According to the story, it will remain that way forever in a state that astronomers call heat death. But the Bible teaches that the world will be judged and remade. Paradise will be restored. The Big Bang denies this crucial biblical teaching.
Which sounds an awful lot like the creation story at the beginning of the Bible.
Does it? Does it really sound similar? Or is it that you recognise the overwhelming evidence in favour of the Big Bang and thus are bending over backwards to reinterpret scripture like a heretic? To quote Answers in Genesis, they, Ben in this case, choose to reinterpret the plain teachings of scripture in an attempt to make it mesh with secular beliefs about origins. Answers in Genesis are wrong, of course, to say that the Big Bang is secular. The Big Bang is no more secular than thermodynamics or a spherical Earth is secular. But they are correct in their central statement here. Theists like Ben reinterpret their supposed holy works to fit Big Bang cosmology. And it's frankly hilarious. Watching religious people contort their contradictory medieval books to accommodate contemporary knowledge, it's pretty cute.
How does an entire universe full of energy simply appear out of nothing?
Oh, I know this one. It's easy. It didn't. Again, if Ben had bothered to do any damn research before confidently spewing such nonsense, he'd have known this. When it comes to the Big Bang, there's an extremely prominent fallacy that comes up, namely the equivocation fallacy, which occurs when someone uses the same term in different contexts without distinguishing between them. To give a relevant example, we say that there are laws in the legal sense if they're being rules of conduct prescribed and enforced by a controlling authority, but we also say that there are laws in the scientific sense if there being statements based on repeated experiments that describe or predict a range of natural phenomena. Theists, however, tend to equate these uses, claiming that the scientific laws are prescribed by the big guy upstairs. And when it comes to the Big Bang, the equivocation is on the word began. Just as we would say that you, for instance, began to exist after your father and mother engaged in afternoon delight, or fine, after dark delight, we likewise say that the universe began to exist 13.7 billion years ago. Notice that in both cases we're not saying that the atoms which comprise the entity came into being from nothing. Theists like Ben fallaciously equate on the word began and thus claim that at the beginning of the Big Bang everything came into existence, but it didn't. Funny enough, Pope Pius XII enthusiastically made the same leap as Ben, only to have George Lemaitre, that is, the Catholic priest that came up with the Big Bang Theory in the first place, to speak out against him. Now, as for the clip Ben shows, I'm not sure where he got it from. It could be from another documentary, or he could have commissioned someone else's voice. But in any case, this makes him 3 for 3 on getting basic facts about the Big Bang Theory wrong.
Debunked.
Despite all of this, and moving on, Ben then insisted, if we recall, that skeptics objected to the Big Bang precisely because of its alleged biblical confirming nature.
The original skepticism of the Big Bang Theory was driven in large measure by objections to that similarity.
To support this claim, Ben has offered no evidence, and so our response is, of course, that which is asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. Whether or not the universe began to exist out of nothing has no bearing on atheism or theism. It's consistent with both. Aquinas, for instance, famously objected to the Kalam on account of it being perfectly possible for God to have created the universe from eternity. Likewise, whether the universe popped into being or not is compatible with atheism either way. At the end of the day, be we theists or atheists, we're all going to have to bite into a big, fat, disgusting brute fact. A fact that exists with no explanation. It's just that atheists bite this before assuming all sorts of additional baggage. Now, if you're interested in the discussion behind why we must all buy a brute fact, then please see my video link below. Anyhow, let's move on.
The very specific conditions under which our universe was created that allowed for the development of intelligent human life are often used by believers as proof of God's hand. The so-called fine-tuning of the universe for life is extraordinary.
So first of all, notice Ben's emphasis on specifically intelligent human life.
Of intelligent human life.
This distinction might seem subtle, but it's not. If we're considering specifically human life, that is, specifically one primate that evolved on the plains of Africa, as opposed to life altogether, then Ben's fine-tuning argument is trivial, even if we grant it outright. To see why, let's give Douglas Adams the floor. This is a hefty clip, I have to say, but it's a brilliant piece of commentary on teleological thinking.
We always ask ourselves why, because we look for intention around us, because we always intend, we do something with intention. You know, we boil an egg in order to eat it. So we look at the rocks and we look at the trees and we wonder what intention is here, even though it doesn't have intention. So we think, so what did this person who made this world intend it for? And this is the point where you think, well, it fits me very well. You know, the caves and the forests and the stream and the mammoths. He must have made it for me. I mean, there's no other conclusion you can come to. And it's rather like a puddle waking up one morning. I know they don't normally do this, but allow me, I'm a science fiction writer. A puddle wakes up one morning and thinks, this is a very interesting world I find myself in. It fits me very neatly. In fact, it fits me so neatly, I mean, really precise, isn't it? It must have been made to have me in it. And the sun rises, and he's continuing to narrate the story about this hole being made to have him in it. And the sun rises, and gradually the puddle is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And by the time the puddle ceases to exist, it's still thinking, it's still trapped in this idea that the hole was there for it. And if we think the world is here for us, we will continue to destroy it in the way that we've been destroying it.
Douglas concludes his insight by suggesting that we protect our planet, which no doubt will trigger those who are not so interested in preventing climate change, like Ben, who suggests that people just sell their houses if rising water levels flood their homes.
You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
Just one small problem! Sell their houses to who, Ben? Fucking Aquaman!
But Douglas's point on teleology is on the money. Religions have had an awful habit of getting everything backwards, from the earth being made before the stars, to woman being made from man, to the earth adapting to our needs. No. Per evolution by natural selection, it is us that has adapted to the earth. The reason we sit so snugly in the hole we find ourselves in is because we adapted to the hole, not the other way around. Now, while appealing to evolution is perfectly fine according to many theists, and even most Christians, Ben evidently rejects evolution, just like his teammate Dennis Prager. And him presenting the creationist/intelligent design proponent Stephen Meyer as an expert on biology reveals just how much of science Ben rejects. It's pretty awkward, and it's explicitly for religious reasons. But to get back to the point, by specifying his fine-tuning argument to human intelligence, Ben's argument is very weak. To illustrate why, suppose we threw 10 20-sided dice one at a time and recorded the sequence. And then your friend, hypothetically, let's call him Ben, insists that we be flabbergasted by how unlikely it would be for us to roll the exact same sequence again. In fact, he's so flabbergasted that he aggressively and obnoxiously accuses you of being delusional if you won't infer immediately from this mind-blowing fact that God exists, and that he really doesn't like your foreskin. Seems absurd, right? That is because it is. The fact of the matter is that we don't have a damn clue what sequences allow for intelligent life. For all we know, it might be all even outcomes, or it could be that pretty much any outcome permits life in some form or another. We haven't a clue. The central premise that Ben has to establish is that intelligent life altogether is rare. That in the billions of solar systems scattered throughout the observable and indeed unobservable universe, including, should they exist, other dimensions and so forth, that intelligent life, that is, life that's so intelligent in fact, that its intellectual stars don't even fact-check the most basic of claims, is rare. Oh, human arrogance. How you disgust me. Now I have more to say here, but I'll save my words for now.
The so-called fine-tuning of the universe for life is extraordinary.
But again, is it extraordinary? Sure, we can specify that human life requires specific conditions, but this is just the puddle being flabbergasted by how snugly the hole in the ground holds it, the rain feeds it, and the sun keeps it at the perfect temperature.
If, for example, the strength of the Big Bang had differed by 1 part in 10 to the 60th power, the universe just would not exist the way that it does right now.
If the deistic God thought all that through and set up the laws of physics, then he would have to be damn clever.
Right. First of all, Ben has quote-mined Richard Dawkins to make out that he was endorsing the fine-tuning argument, but the full context reveals that he wasn't, and you can see me expand upon this in my last instalment. Second, Ben insists that if the initial conditions of the universe were different, then the universe wouldn't exist the way that it does right now.
The universe just would not exist the way that it does right now.
This is no different to him referencing specifically intelligent human life. You know, pointing out after we've rolled the dice that if we were to re-roll the dice, the chances that we get exactly the same result would be very unlikely. And my response is the same. Yes, the universe would be different if the universe was different. Many will. Much insight. Ben's obsession over specifically human intelligent life and the universe existing specifically in the way that it does right now renders his argument trivial per the dice analogy I gave just a moment ago. We can grant his argument and it gets us nowhere. But if, as we go on, we still man his argument, and we will, so that it's not so tightly constricted, there's much more to be said.
If, for example, the strength of the Big Bang had differed by 1 part in 10 to the 60th power.
The strength of the Big Bang. Based on the 1 part in 10 to the 60th power, perhaps Ben is referring to the cosmological constant, which more than less is a form of energy that acts in opposition to gravity. And even if he's not, the cosmological constant is recognised as the creme de la creme of supporting fine-tuning arguments, and so let's roll with it. In a nutshell, if we could rewind to the initial state of the Big Bang and ever so slightly turn the dial of the cosmological constant one way, then the universe would have collapsed in on itself. Alternatively, if we were ever so slightly to turn it the other way, then atoms today would be light years apart. And in either case, so proponents of fine-tuning claim, we would have no life at all. Therefore, God must have finely tuned it. So what's some of the objections to this argument? Well, let me give you 3 of my favourites, and let's set up the first for a question. Why do theists like Ben so insult God's intelligence and power by limiting him to specific conditions? This is God we're talking about, the Almighty. According to theists, life is not purely physical. Indeed, they insist that at least some of us who happen to be convinced of absurd propositions will live on after death. Intelligent life, then, can thrive without any physical conditions. Couple this with the fact that theists tend to believe in unembodied entities such as angels, and it becomes clear that by their own commitments, no less, the conditions required for intelligent life are not precise, are they? God can maintain intelligent life under numerous conditions. In fact, with God being all-powerful, he could surely create intelligent life under pretty much any condition. Unless you can show a contradiction, there's no reason to limit the unlimited, is there? To think that God couldn't create life unless atoms are specifically spaced apart, that there's a precise number of dimensions, or that the cosmological constant is ever so slightly tuned, is to fail to understand his alleged attributes. It's an insult to God. This is God we're talking about. Who's to say he couldn't create life that spans light years? I mean, even if we just consider the infinitesimal areas of the universe that we can investigate, we find life all over it. Life exists in ultra-big forms and ultra-small, from the ceilings of the sky to the bedrock of the oceans, from the heart of volcanoes to the frozen tundra of Antarctica, where all real estate is owned by Aquaman. Sure, there's not necessarily intelligent life everywhere, but what even is intelligent life? How do we measure it? In any case, I'd bet that those penguins with Aquaman check their sources as often as Ben does. I mean, as long as they don't check their sources at all, then they're on par with Ben. And for me, at least, this objection alone completely debunks fine-tuning arguments. To limit the unlimited in the pursuit of proving the existence of the unlimited is bonkers. It reveals that proponents lean on their intuitions as opposed, ironically enough, to their intellect.
Debunked.
As a second objection, could it be that proponents of fine-tuning are simply repeating the mistakes of their predecessors? Just as we once thought the Earth to be the only planet in our solar system, but later discovered that it isn't, and just as we once thought the solar system to be the only solar system in the universe, but later discovered that it also isn't, perhaps we'll one day discover that the Earth is but one of many universes. Or, you know what, forget the multiverse consideration and simply muster the humility to ponder just how big the universe is. If someone were to travel at the speed of light, they could circumnavigate the Earth's equator 7.5 times in a second. Indeed, light speed is insanely fast. But if the traveller wanted to traverse the diameter of the observable universe, they'd need to travel at, get this, the speed of light for 93 billion years, which is nearly 7 times longer than since the universe's initial expansion occurred. Yeah, The observable universe has an utterly absurd diameter, and yet this is just the observable universe. As for the size of the unobservable universe, who knows? Now, don't you think that in all that vastness, it's possible that there's areas where no electrons reside, areas where atoms can't form, and areas where, maybe, the cosmological constant is different? I, for one, see every reason to take these possibilities seriously. Until recently, our humility, if we want to call it that, was certain that gravity functioned the same everywhere. But it doesn't. Why be so certain to apply our already debunked arrogance to the entire cosmos? Why repeat the mistakes of our ancestors, particularly our religious ancestors? If we're willing to grant the aforementioned suggestions, if we're willing to say that the universe is far more diverse than we thought, then we have a simple explanation for intelligent life that doesn't require us to bite down on, at a later date, all sorts of theodicies. All it requires is a big old bite of humility, and it's not like we haven't swallowed our fill already. The scientific revolution has bent our ego over a barrel, and good riddance. Anyhow, to conclude this objection, let me yield the floor to the physicist Leonard Susskind, who gives us an insightful comparison with liquid water.
It's more or less like asking, why do we by accident happen to live on a planet which happens to be at just the right temperature for liquid water to exist? That's a narrow range. Not as narrow, it's not as much of a knife edge as the cosmological constant. Why is that? Well, the answer is very simple. On planets where there can't be water, there can't be life. So it's true, a very small fraction of the planets in the universe are at the right temperature for water to exist. Where do we live? We live in the only place we can live, where water exists. Same kind of picture. Universe very big, very diverse, many different environments, a huge slew of different possibilities. And among these possibilities, in a few small pockets of the universe, conditions are right for life, and that's where life exists.
Debunked.
As a final objection, let's suppose that Ben's fine-tuning argument is sound. That is, that it was indeed extremely unlikely that any intelligent life emerged in the universe, and yet it has. In other words, let's tentatively grant all of Ben's premises. Where does this leave us? Does it get us to an intelligent agent? No, it doesn't. But let's go further and assume it does. Let's assume Ben's fine-tuning argument gets us all the way to intelligent agency. Let's grant all of this. Finally, we're at Heaven's Gate, right? The God of the Bible stands before us. Hell no, definitely not. To scratch the surface, who's to say that there was only one intelligent creator? Or even that the intelligent creator is still alive? I mean, the Mona Lisa was created by Leonardo da Vinci, but it doesn't follow that da Vinci is still alive, does it? Now, one might be thinking, Steve, that's not a fair analogy, because da Vinci didn't create the Mona Lisa out of nothing. Rather, he rearranged pre-existing material. To which I retort, yes, that's another great point. Even if we grant the entirety of Ben's argument, in fact, the Stillman version of his argument, we're still left, as Christopher Hitchens might have put it, empty-handed, with all of our work still ahead of us to get anywhere near the theism of the three monotheistic faiths. And I really don't think that most proponents ever really digest this objection. To rephrase it in my favourite form, if the universe was finely tuned to have no intelligent life until, very specifically, 14 billion years had elapsed, and then finally, out of the embers of several mass extinctions and billions of years of evolution, an intelligent mammalian ape would finally appear, then I think it's exceedingly unlikely that the fine-tuner is all-loving and all-powerful. Don't you? The idea that an all-powerful, all-loving God would choose to finely tune the gratuitous evil that has produced us is so hilariously absurd as to be an insult to human integrity, let alone intelligence. So there's my 3 favourite objections. If you'd like to see a few more of them, then may I suggest that you take a look at my Arguments for God's Existence tier list. In that video, I do my best to give what I consider to be the most potent objections to all of the most common arguments wielded by apologists. If you're into theology, I think there's a decent chance that video will aid you in your pursuit of truth. Well, that's that. That's me done with Ben's documentary, The Atheist Delusion. When I set out, I wanted to ensure that I give each element the time that it deserves. From Ben's frankly abusive rhetoric, to his many logical fallacies, to his lack of references, to his quote mining and misrepresentations, to his poor argumentation, I wanted to address it all. And I thank you for joining me on this journey, as indeed I have. And I'd also like to thank, again, Blinkist for supporting 2 of the episodes, and urge once again my fellow apes to check the link out below for 25% off. Anyhow, what's the goal from here, huh? Well, I'm considering taking on Matt Walsh's What is a Woman documentary, or maybe Jordan Peterson's Exodus, or you know what, maybe it's time to take Dennis Prager's Masters program. Who knows? But if any of this sounds like it's up your street, and if you found value in my takes on Ben Shapiro, then please consider becoming a patron or YouTube member. I've got big plans for the channel, but without the support of legends like you, I won't be able to see them through to fruition.